Welcome to today's webinar, Pivoting Your Business Model to Become an Essential Service. My name is David Turgeon. I am a partner, lawyer, and patent agent in our Montreal office and leader of the Intellectual Property Group. Today, I'm joined by Stuart Kozlick, a strategic advisor and executive in residence in the Intellectual Property Group in Montreal. Nathalie-Anne Béliveau, a partner in commercial litigation, labor, and employment in Montreal. Amélie Béliveau, an associate lawyer and trademark agent in our Intellectual Property Group in Montreal. And Antonio Di Domenico, a partner in Toronto and co-leader of the Antitrust, Competition, and Marketing Group. At the end of the webinar, please click the survey link underneath the video to fill in our survey. These surveys help us to determine topics to cover, and your input is greatly appreciated. During the question and answer portion, we will try to address as many of your submitted questions as possible. If you have further inquiries, please reach out to our presenters directly. Our contact information is in the presentation materials and on Fasken.com. We have a number of upcoming COVID-19 related webinars and pre-recorded seminars. Please visit the Fasken Institute section of Fasken.com to see what is next. Our COVID-19 Knowledge Center on Fasken.com is also continually updated with bulletins, blog posts, and upcoming webinar information. Without further delay, I will turn it over to Stuart Kozlick. Stuart?
Good afternoon, everybody. Pleasure to be here for me to be able to provide some information for those Canadian businesses looking to be able to pivot your businesses and your core services towards essential services designation. Next slide, please. As a brief background, I think it's extremely important for everybody to have a general understanding to the adopted definition of where we are, why we're here, with respect to the COVID-19 pandemic. As you see in front of you, these are the adopted definitions and designations from our regulatory agencies, Health Canada, from international regulatory agencies, and from the World Health Organization. And I think it's extremely important to be able to baseline everybody when a decision is made accordingly, to be able to pivot your associated businesses, just to be able to understand what you're getting yourselves into, and just to be able to have that baseline definition that spans across all the affected geographies. It's important also to be able to understand the appropriate timelines that are be able to put into place with respect to the when the pandemic initiated, when certain things were adopted with respect to WHO, and when the Health Canada Interim Order came into effect, which we'll be looking at in more detail. Next slide, please. So something to keep in mind as a medical device manufacturer or as a general manufacturer, if you're looking to be able to pivot your business accordingly towards an essential business designation, I think it's important to be able to focus in on what the country needs right now. And with respect to medical devices, there is an extreme shortage of technologies, of product, of accessories as listed in front of you. These are designated as both Class 1 and Class 3 type devices, and we'll go through very, very high level what will be required of a business that enters into this area. But again, an appropriated focus would be on masks. And so masks and face shields, very highly used, currently being used once and disposed of thereafter once coming into contact with a patient. So very large shortages there. Appropriated gowns, medical gowns that any frontline healthcare worker is wearing, again, typical one-time use type disposable, and then discarded thereafter. So very large shortages with respect to our healthcare ecosystem. And then in terms of some of the Class 3 devices for support care, mechanical ventilators, there's a lot of innovation being performed right now in our country and a lot of collaborative countries around the globe to be able to innovate around next generation type ventilators, low cost, scalable type ventilators to be able to bring these technologies to patients. So these would be your focus areas. In terms of the interim order, so as with any medical device, okay, there's appropriated processes in a normal climate, in a normal day-to-day type of activities to be able to get certain technologies approved to market and then utilized accordingly. What our regulatory agency of Health Canada has done in conjunction with our neighboring countries, including the United States, the European Union, and other countries around the world, is they have essentially brought forward what they call an interim order. Essentially, it's a streamlined process in order to get some of the aforementioned medical devices on the previous slide through our appropriated regulatory system, through our appropriated sourcing system, and get them to market faster. It's important to understand that this streamlined approach doesn't strip away any requirements that they would typically stipulate on medical device manufacturers that cover safety and efficacy, and will review the specific requirements that are still being requested, but it is a streamlined process. In addition, something to note, all COVID-19 type technologies are being prioritized with respect to these regulatory agencies. Therefore, if there are any traditional medical device manufacturers in the audience today and you have a submission in place, I urge you to get in touch with your regulatory authority. It'll most probably be put as a second or tertiary type of priority during this time. Next slide. So the interim order itself essentially centers around the authorization for importation or sale of technology. If there's medical device manufacturers or manufacturers that want to pivot towards manufacturing of these types of technologies, at the end of the day, the end result is the overall sale and distribution of such technology. Or importation. If you were a manufacturer, or you're a distributor, or you're a distribution channel, and you want to expand your appropriated channels because of your networks, bring any of the aforementioned technologies into the country, you would still also fall under the interim order. The interim order is in effect up until our appropriated governments agree to essentially call off the pandemic state that we're in. Nobody really knows that timeline presently. I know a lot of individuals and business owners are monitoring very closely some of the communications from our governments and international governments. But for the time being, we remain under the pandemic climate. Therefore, the interim order remains in effect. What the regulatory agencies have agreed upon is anything that is approved under the interim order will remain valid and, for lack of better words, approved appropriately for 1 year period thereafter. So if we exit the pandemic safely and everybody's healthy at the end of July, therefore you'll have until July 2021 in order to appropriate communications with your appropriated regulatory agency and see if there's any other follow-ups with respect to your regulatory submission. So it's extremely important to understand the duration of the period of the interim order. Next slide, please. Another thing that with respect to the streamlined process, and I know this is being carried out in Canada, it is being looked at for specific classifications of medical devices in the United States and in other neighboring countries. But with respect to Canada, when you submit any application for a medical device, typically there are fees applied to it. But any medical device moving forward under the interim order that fits a COVID-19 medical device subject area, all fees are applicably waived with respect to the application process. Next slide, please. Something that is extremely important and every medical device manufacturer should be aware of and still finds itself within the interim order is for any medical device manufacturer, it's extremely important to have in place appropriated processes and procedures to ensure repeatability and reliability of anything and everything that manufacturer does. These are called essentially a quality management system and a quality management system set of requirements. Under the interim order, a medical device manufacturer is still going to be required to show evidence of certain elements of this quality system. However, certain certifications are no longer going to be required as they would typically. You simply need to demonstrate accordingly the level of quality, and we'll describe it in the next few slides, but essentially you need to be able to provide evidence of safety and efficacy and quality of your set technology, even if it's a MASc, or as stringent or as robust or as rigorous as a ventilator would require. Base elements of quality is required to be demonstrated to a regulatory agency. Next slide, please. So in essence, an application to any regulatory agency will typically have these sections, okay? The interim order doesn't strip away any of these specific sections. They basically just reduce down some of the elements that are required for these sections. Some of them are pretty self-explanatory, although I will spend a little bit of time on 3 specific areas, both to be able to ensure that anybody who's pivoting towards becoming a medical device manufacturer for the first time, or manufacturing medical devices for the first time, simply understand these types of definitions. And I'll highlight certain aspects that still remain even under this streamlined interim order. Next slide, please. So for intended use of the device, the definition of intended use is essentially that first bullet point. The intended purpose, mechanism of action, and appropriated indication for use for the conditions in which the device is used. Okay, every medical device requires a definition for intended use of device. That was not stripped away accordingly. An appropriated definition can be determined accordingly with any predicate device that's already on the market. So if you are mass producing masks or face shields, these have been done before. Simply go and refer to any definitions that already exist through the Health Canada website or the FD website, and you can leverage those definitions accordingly. But a lot of medical device manufacturers typically give a type of definition, especially when it's their first time, basically define what the product is, but not what the product is intended to be used for. And under what conditions or what conditions or surrounding systems the product is intended to be used for. So it's extremely important to be able to include these types of definitions under the section for intended use of device. Again, especially for those of you that have never produced or submitted for a medical device application. Next slide, please. Quality system, safety, and effectiveness information. So the next couple of slides here basically summarize, as you can imagine, I mean, there's quite a number of bullet points on here, and we're not going to spend the time to go through each bullet point here. I'm more than happy to be able to do so if anybody reaches out to me and we spend some time offline. What I think is important here is to be able to understand, typically this list is absolutely exhaustive. There are pages and pages of data that is required to be able to be submitted to a regulatory agency to receive appropriate approval. The bullet points that I pulled out from the interim order essentially are the baseline minimum requirements, and I have an example a little later on in the slides, but it's a baseline requirement package that is going to be required, again, whether you're looking at a class 1 medical device like a MASc, or you're looking at the ventilator class 3, you need to be able to provide minimum areas of, for lack of better words, evidence of safety and efficacy, that you have performed certain type testing that fits each one of these criteria. For technology, if you're a medical device manufacturer and you already have a history with Health Canada and you already have been producing these types of or similar types of technology, there is the ability to be able to leverage existing data. For example, the second bullet in the second column looks for a summary of any animal testing or clinical investigations carried out with the device. You can claim predicate devices accordingly to be able to substantiate and rationalize your data that's been compiled to the regulatory agency. Next slide, please. And again, this is a continued outline of specific extracts from the interim order in terms of the base minimum requirements that Health Canada, our regulatory agency, is looking for your submission package, again, to prove quality, safety, and efficacy of the device being submitted for. Next slide, please. Directions for use, again, it somewhat sometimes seems very self-explanatory, but it's very important, very similar to the indication for use. Directions for use are essentially instructions, okay? Any type device, and you can imagine how important this would be for a ventilator class 3 type medical device, but even for a face shield or a mask, it's extremely important to be able to provide appropriated directions for use with your product. So if it's not just manufacturing and packaging your product and sending it out, regulatory agencies are going to require some kind, whether it's paper-based, whether it's online-based, some kind of directions for use or instructions for use. So then the users, the hospital administrators, all the frontline users that are going to be utilizing the technology, again, as simple as a face mask and the directions on how to hook around the ear loops around the ear and have it snug to your face and cover your nose and portions of your mouth and tuck under your chin, as straightforward as that, need to be documented accordingly and provided to the first line healthcare workers and to the hospital administrations accordingly. Next slide, please. As with any medical device manufacturer, it's one thing to be able to submit your Health Canada approval, but in Canada, it's also important to be able to get your medical device establishment license for your manufacturing facility. So your Health Canada approval is designated to the technology itself. The manufacturing of that technology is designated through the MDEL. So it's important to identify your appropriated site that will be producing the manufacturing. And that's why we provided, there's an application provided for an MDEL, and the links are provided. The forms have separate levels of information that are provided, as you can see on the slide. Next slide, please. I wanted to be able to provide just a little bit of an example, and I took an extreme example here just because of some of our implication with some medical device manufacturers in Canada presently under the situation with respect to ventilators. And I just kind of did a straightforward type bullet to bullet type comparison. Under a normal climate, if we weren't under an interim order, essentially the left-hand column outlines what the process or what the level of information would be required by Health Canada, by other regulatory agencies for a Class 3 medical device ventilator. Some of the differences that I'll pull out very briefly is, at the end of the day, if we come back to the quality management system requirements that I described briefly, there is a specific standard that medical device manufacturers need to adhere to. It's called ISO 13485. Under the COVID-19 interim order, it is not a requirement for medical device manufacturers to show full compliance with 13485, but rather, and very similarly to the previous slides where I outlined a whole bunch of different bullet points, they extracted certain elements from 13485 that they deemed required by the medical device manufacturers. In addition, certain aspects of safety and compliance with respect to electrical safety, EMC type testing for your technology. Again, those standards do exist, IEC 6601-1-2, et cetera, et cetera. Again, our regulatory agencies, along with ISO, along with IEC, along with other regulatory agencies, basically streamlined the specific types of requirements, which is actually a good idea. 6601 is a 492-page standard that is typically need to provide evidence for every single clause. Under COVID-19, what was deemed critical in terms of critical safety and efficacy was pulled out and is required under the interim order. So again, straightforward type of example comparing what would occur under a normal climate, what would be requested of us under the COVID-19 interim order. Next slide, please. And to close, I wanted to be able to provide as much information and references with respect to a lot of the information that's being provided by our government, by our Health Canada, our regulatory agency. And thus you can see a lot of different references here with respect to what classifies a specific product under COVID-19. Another example is how do we optimize if you're doing research and development or new streamlined type manufacturing processes for any of these devices. You can see some of the references here that be able to help provide appropriated type steps, areas to focus on, et cetera, et cetera. In addition, and just so that everybody's aware, in the second column, the third bullet, The International Standards Organization has made, through open source, a plethora of different ISO standards that typically are required to be purchased ahead of time. And they've done so in collaboration with our regulatory agencies to be able to have this information, these critical requirements and information that are required for device development in medical device, open and free to reference and utilize to ensure the most robust, highest quality, most efficacious type technologies get put through some of these regulatory filings. And again, appreciated the time to be able to provide some of this preliminary and high level information with respect to, if you're going to pivot your business accordingly in the medical device area to be able to support COVID-19 type technologies. These are the basics. And if there's any questions or any follow-ups, I am more than happy to set up appropriated follow-up calls. Thank you, everybody.
We'll now turn it to Nathalie-Anne and Amélie, who will present in French la poursuite des activités de façon conforme et sécuritaire.
Alors, bonjour à tous. Nous vous proposons un tour d'horizon des règles présentement en vigueur au Québec dans le contexte de la COVID-19, en ce qui concerne plus particulièrement les activités des entreprises. Alors, c'est évidemment un domaine nouveau et vaste, à l'égard duquel nous avons conseillé de nombreux clients au cours des dernières semaines. Ce qui est important de retenir, c'est qu'on va regarder quelles sont les règles générales aujourd'hui, mais il faut toujours s'adresser évidemment à votre avocat pour déterminer si vous faites partie ou non des services considérés comme étant prioritaires par le gouvernement. Alors, en effet, au Québec, le décret concernant les services prioritaires maintenus a été adopté le 24 mars 2020. Il fait suite à la déclaration du 11 mars 2020 de l'Organisation mondiale de la santé concernant la pandémie de la COVID-19. Cette pandémie constitue une menace réelle et grave pour la santé de la population et le gouvernement québécois a par conséquent déclaré l'état d'urgence sanitaire. Le décret prévoit en fait la fermeture à partir du 24 mars 2020 de l'ensemble des commerces et des services déclarés non prioritaires. Plus précisément, le décret ordonne que toute activité effectuée en milieu de travail soit suspendue, sauf à l'égard des milieux de travail où sont offerts des services prioritaires énumérés spécifiquement en annexe du décret. Donc, on a un décret et en annexe se trouve une liste qui est évolutive où sont énumérés l'ensemble des secteurs que le gouvernement a décrétés comme étant prioritaires. L'objectif du décret est évidemment de protéger la santé de la population et cet objectif doit en tout temps être gardé à l'esprit lorsque vient le temps d'analyser la situation et de déterminer si des activités d'une entreprise se qualifient ou non comme étant des activités prioritaires maintenues. Le décret doit donc faire l'objet d'une interprétation qui est restrictive plutôt qu'une interprétation large, puisque les activités maintenues constituent l'exception et non la règle. Il est important, je le souligne, de prendre connaissance du décret de façon régulière, puisque la liste des activités prioritaires maintenues est évolutive plutôt que statique. Par exemple, très récemment, en date du 14 avril 2020, la ministre de la Santé et des Services sociaux a ajouté à la liste des services prioritaires par un arrêté l'entretien paysager, incluant les pépinières, les centres de jardin et les commerces de piscine, et l'entretien et les réparations des véhicules, ce qui a permis à tout le monde d'aller faire poser ses pneus d'hiver. Ensuite, par arrêté du 19 avril 2020, la ministre a ajouté la construction et la rénovation d'habitations résidentielles pour tout immeuble où la prise de possession d'une unité résidentielle devait avoir lieu au plus tard le 31 juillet 2020. Cet ajout a été rendu nécessaire, évidemment, pour éviter une éventuelle crise du logement. Alors, une activité qui est aujourd'hui considérée comme étant suspendue pourrait facilement passer dans la catégorie des activités maintenues demain ou la semaine prochaine. Et c'est la raison pour laquelle il est important de demeurer à jour, et surtout à l'heure actuelle où on parle de plus en plus de réouverture progressive, il est important de consulter la liste des activités prioritaires de façon quotidienne. N'oublions pas que le plan de relance du gouvernement sera annoncé demain et aujourd'hui, on devrait connaître la date à laquelle les activités scolaires devraient reprendre, ce qui entraînera évidemment une modification importante sûrement dans l'annexe du décret. Nouvelle diapositive. Alors, quels sont les services prioritaires que le gouvernement a décidé de maintenir? Évidemment, ce sont celles qui sont énumérées à l'annexe du décret. Elles sont en général faciles à identifier, portent peu à interprétation. Je vous ai énuméré quelques exemples, mais évidemment, ça fait plusieurs pages. Il y a les pharmacies, les services incendie, les épiceries et les dépanneurs, les services de fabrication d'instruments médicaux, comme par exemple les respirateurs, ou encore les masques protecteurs, les services de fabrication de produits sanitaires, tels les produits désinfectants pour les mains. Mais il y a évidemment une vaste variété de services qui ont été considérés comme étant prioritaires pour la population du Québec et qui sont énumérés à l'annexe. Je vais vous parler maintenant du cas particulier des intrants nécessaires au secteur prioritaire qui a en large partie retenu notre attention depuis que le décret a été mis en vigueur. Nouvelle diapositive. Alors, une des notions qui a été plus difficile à interpréter, qui a retenu l'attention de tous là, depuis l'entrée en vigueur du décret, je le disais, c'est celui des intrants nécessaires au secteur prioritaire. Alors, à l'annexe du décret, il est prévu que, en toutes lettres, les entreprises peuvent produire des intrants nécessaires au secteur prioritaire. Donc, il doit s'agir d'un intrant, donc un bien qui est produit, qui est manufacturé, et qui va être nécessaire pour un secteur prioritaire. Je vous donne un exemple. La fabrication de lits, on pourrait penser qu'il ne s'agit pas d'un intrant qui pourrait être nécessaire à un secteur prioritaire, mais par contre, s'il s'agit d'un lit d'hôpital, effectivement, un lit, la fabrication des lits d'hôpitaux est nécessaire à l'exploitation des hôpitaux et aux activités des hôpitaux, et ça sera donc considéré comme un intrant nécessaire pour le secteur des hôpitaux. Maintenant, plusieurs entreprises ont tenté, avec raison, depuis le 24 mars 2020, de maintenir leurs activités sous le couvert de cette exception qui est prévue au décret. Il faut toutefois être prudent en cette matière, surtout si on tient compte des conséquences de ne pas respecter le décret, dont nous discutons ultérieurement. On peut se poser une première question quant aux intrants pour les secteurs prioritaires. On peut se demander si une entreprise qui fabrique des intrants pour un secteur prioritaire, mais qui livre 50% de ses marchandises à l'extérieur du Québec, par exemple en Ontario ou encore aux États-Unis, pourrait maintenir 100% de sa production. Pour répondre à cette question, il faut revenir à l'objectif du décret. Quand on interprète le décret, il faut toujours revenir à son objectif. Quel est-il? C'est d'assurer les services prioritaires dans l'intérêt public pendant la pandémie dans la province de Québec. En effet, le gouvernement du Québec souhaite-t-il assurer les services prioritaires dans l'intérêt public des citoyens ailleurs au Canada ou encore aux États-Unis? Alors, poser cette question-là, c'est y répondre. Il est évident que le gouvernement souhaite assurer l'intérêt des citoyens de la province de Québec et donc la production doit en effet être réduite à ce qui est nécessaire pour fournir les secteurs prioritaires dans la province de Québec. Maintenant, on peut se poser une seconde question en ce qui concerne l'entreprise qui produit des intrants nécessaires à un secteur prioritaire. On peut se demander de quel secteur prioritaire parle-t-on? Est-ce qu'il doit s'agir nécessairement d'un secteur prioritaire qui est listé en annexe du décret ou il peut s'agir d'un secteur qui est prioritaire ailleurs au Canada ou ailleurs ou dans un État américain? Ce qu'il faut savoir, c'est que les différentes provinces canadiennes et les différents États américains ont adopté également des listes de secteurs qu'ils considéraient prioritaires qui peuvent différer substantiellement ou encore de façon anecdotique de la liste qui a été adoptée par le législateur québécois. Mais on pourrait être tenté de dire qu'une entreprise qui fabrique des intrants pour un secteur prioritaire, ça pourrait être n'importe quel secteur prioritaire de n'importe quelle province ou État, mais ce n'est pas le cas. En fait, ce qui est important, c'est que le secteur prioritaire en question soit un secteur prioritaire listé au décret en vigueur au Québec. Ça veut dire, dans notre exemple que je donnais tantôt, qu'une entreprise dont la moitié de la production est destinée à l'extérieur du Québec devrait en principe réduire sa production à l'extérieur du Québec pour un secteur qui est considéré prioritaire à l'extérieur du Québec devrait réduire sa production. Ce que je dois vous mentionner lorsque je parle de réduire la production, certaines entreprises doivent effectivement, à toute fin pratique, mettre fin à leurs opérations puisqu'ils ne font pas partie des secteurs prioritaires. Le décret prévoit toutefois, dans tous les cas, qu'une entreprise peut maintenir un minimum d'activité requis pour assurer la reprise de ses activités au terme de la pandémie. Alors, ce que ça veut dire, c'est qu'il y a toujours un minimum d'activités qui peuvent être poursuivies par les entreprises. Je vous invite à communiquer avec nous si toutefois vous avez des questions sur les entreprises, sur les secteurs que vous pouvez et les activités que vous pouvez poursuivre durant durant que le décret va demeurer en vigueur. Nouvelle diapositive. Enfin, même si votre entreprise exerce des activités qui sont dites prioritaires et qui sont listées spécifiquement au décret, vous n'avez pas l'obligation, d'une part, de maintenir ces activités, mais si vous décidez de poursuivre ces activités, vous avez l'obligation de vous conformer aux directives de la santé publique et des autres obligations qui vous incombent en vertu des lois applicables pour toute activité autorisée, notamment ce qui concerne la santé et la sécurité des employés. Vous devez donc prendre toutes les mesures nécessaires sanitaires qui s'imposent pour assurer la protection de la santé et de la sécurité de vos salariés. Ça peut inclure de respecter les règles de distanciation sociale de 2 mètres, de respecter les règles sanitaires du lavage des mains. On verra si éventuellement le port du masque deviendra obligatoire dans certains milieux de travail. S'il devient obligatoire, vous devrez respecter cette règle. Et il y a du matériel et d'autres règles qui peuvent être en vigueur selon les secteurs d'activité. Il faudra suivre attentivement l'évolution de la situation pour déterminer quelles sont les règles applicables et dans quel milieu. Nous passons à présent à la seconde portion de notre présentation, en l'occurrence les pouvoirs des autorités chargées de l'application du décret et les conséquences possibles, directes ou indirectes, du non-respect du décret. Et je passe la parole à Amélie.
Merci Nathalie-Anne. Prochaine diapositive. Donc, comme on le verra lors de ma présentation, les conséquences, le non-respect du décret, en fait, peut être lourd de conséquences. Il peut entraîner notamment l'imposition d'amendes, des avis d'infraction, et donc il faut se garder de l'interpréter trop largement. Le pouvoir des autorités est régi par diverses lois dans le contexte actuel. Je vais faire un bref survol de certaines lois pertinentes qui s'appliquent toujours dans le contexte de la pandémie du COVID-19, notamment la loi sur la santé publique, le Code de procédure pénale, le Code criminel, mais également la loi sur la santé et la sécurité au travail. Je n'aurai malheureusement pas le temps de m'attarder longuement sur chacune des lois et chacune des dispositions pertinentes, mais s'il s'agit d'un sujet qui vous intéresse et que vous souhaitez approfondir davantage, je vous invite à consulter et lire 2 bulletins qu'on a écrits spécifiquement sur ce sujet-là. Avant d'entrer dans le vif du sujet, il y a beaucoup de gens qui se demandent comment les policiers viennent à intervenir dans des entreprises. Qu'est-ce qui leur met la puce à l'oreille, si je peux dire ça comme ça? En fait, les plaintes viennent généralement de plusieurs sources différentes. Tout d'abord, simplement des membres du public qui constatent qu'une entreprise maintient ses activités alors que vraisemblablement, elle n'exerce pas des activités qui sont prioritaires en vertu du décret. On a également vu des situations où ce sont des compétiteurs qui ont cessé leurs activités, mais qui voient justement qu'une entreprise poursuit les siennes. Et enfin, il y a également des situations où ça va carrément être des employés qui dénoncent leur employeur qui maintient ses activités. Tout d'abord, je vais passer dès à présent aux dispositions pertinentes. Les policiers peuvent être appelés à intervenir en vertu de la loi sur la santé publique. En effet, cette loi leur permet d'imposer des amendes ou encore des avis d'infraction. C'est bien évidemment, toute intervention, toute activité policière est soumise à diverses lois d'importance au Canada, notamment la Charte canadienne, la Charte des droits et libertés de la personne au Québec, également le Code de procédure pénale. Ceci dit, ces règles de droit seront modulées considérant le contexte d'urgence sanitaire dans lequel on se trouve et l'urgence engendrée par la crise sanitaire permettra un certain élargissement de certains pouvoirs des policiers. Par exemple, on sait qu'habituellement, des policiers ne peuvent entrer dans un lieu privé, par exemple dans les locaux d'une entreprise, sans autorisation judiciaire préalable ou mandat. Ceci étant, considérant le contexte de crise dans lequel on se trouve, lorsque certaines circonstances, certaines conditions seront rencontrées, les policiers pourront entrer dans l'entreprise sans autorisation préalable ni mandat. Et une fois sur place, ils pourront procéder à la saisie de biens infractionnels qui sont à la vue de tous. Ceci étant, ils ne pourront normalement pas, évidemment, procéder à des fouilles et des perquisitions. Ils pourront également prendre les renseignements généraux d'observation des lieux, identifier les personnes responsables des lieux, le tout dans un objectif de pouvoir remplir éventuellement un rapport d'enquête qui sera transmis au directeur des poursuites criminelles et pénales. Les policiers peuvent également interroger les personnes responsables sur place. Ceci dit, ces personnes n'ont pas nécessairement l'obligation de répondre aux questions. Il est toujours bien évidemment conseillé d'appeler immédiatement un avocat si des policiers se présentent à votre entreprise. Et bien entendu, les policiers, si les circonstances le justifient, peuvent procéder à des arrestations. Prochaine diapositive. Comme j'ai mentionné, les policiers vont remplir un rapport d'enquête qu'ils transmettront au DPCP, le directeur des poursuites criminelles et pénales, et c'est une équipe de procureurs au sein du DPCP qui évaluera les faits du dossier, de chacun des dossiers, et qui déterminera s'il y a lieu d'intenter ou non des poursuites. Je porte votre attention à la notion d'entrave au travail des policiers qui pourrait trouver facilement application ici. Comme j'ai mentionné, dans certaines circonstances, les policiers pourraient être justifiés d'entrer sans mandat, sans autorisation judiciaire préalable, et une personne qui refuserait l'accès aux policiers pourrait se retrouver en situation d'entrave à leur travail, et c'est une infraction qui est assez grave. Par exemple, c'est une infraction qui est passible d'une amende assez salée en vertu de la loi sur la santé publique. Prochaine diapositive. Mais c'est également une infraction criminelle en vertu de l'article 129 du Code criminel. Juste pour illustrer la gravité de la chose, rappelons-nous simplement les conséquences liées à une infraction criminelle qui peuvent être lourdes si on pense simplement aux limites de voyage, par exemple des voyages d'affaires, que ce soit aux États-Unis ou à l'étranger, une fois qu'une personne a été reconnue coupable d'une infraction criminelle. Prochaine diapositive. Rapidement, il y a le Code de procédure pénale qui s'applique bien évidemment au travail des policiers, puisque le Code prévoit spécifiquement que les policiers peuvent imposer un avis d'infraction ou encore procéder à l'arrestation de gens s'ils constatent qu'il y a une infraction à une loi provinciale. La loi provinciale, ici, ça serait la loi sur la santé publique. Prochaine diapositive. Il n'y a pas seulement les policiers qui peuvent intervenir si jamais il y a une entreprise qui ne semble pas respecter le décret. Il y a également la Commission des normes de l'équité, de la santé et de la sécurité du travail. Rappelons qu'en vertu de la loi sur la santé et la sécurité du travail, l'employeur a certaines obligations, notamment assurer la santé, la sécurité, l'intégrité physique des travailleurs. Et cette loi donne également des pouvoirs assez importants aux inspecteurs de la commission. Donc, un inspecteur qui visite les lieux et qui estime qu'il y a un danger pour la sécurité des travailleurs peut ordonner la suspension des travaux et la fermeture du lieu de travail et peut imposer des amendes pouvant aller jusqu'à 60 000 $ et ce sont toujours des amendes qui peuvent être doublées en cas de récidive. Donc, il y a des cas où on aura une intervention policière. Certains cas, ce sera plutôt un inspecteur de la commission qui se présentera. Et il y a des situations où, en fait, il y a à la fois des policiers et un inspecteur qui se présentent sur les lieux de l'entreprise. Prochaine diapositive. Ceci me mène au prochain sujet. En fait, suite à l'adoption du décret, malheureusement, il y a plusieurs entreprises qui ont dû suspendre leurs activités, cesser carrément leurs opérations, mais plusieurs d'entre elles ont eu l'idée d'essayer de diversifier leur offre de produits et services afin de se transformer en quelque sorte en entreprise offrant des services prioritaires. Par exemple, on a vu des compagnies commencer à fabriquer des masques, des compagnies commencer à fabriquer des visières pour les travailleurs dans le domaine de la santé, des ventilateurs, etc., etc. L'objectif aujourd'hui sera de vous sensibiliser au risque de contrefaçon parce que bien évidemment, les entreprises qui sont parvenues à transformer carrément leurs activités l'ont fait très rapidement dans un délai de quelques semaines, mais il faut, comme je vais l'expliquer, bien faire attention de faire les vérifications habituellement requises lorsqu'on lance des nouveaux produits. Prochaine diapositive. Je vais aborder rapidement avec vous la question des marques de commerce et mon collègue David Turgeon abordera quant à lui notamment la question des brevets d'invention. Donc, habituellement, lorsqu'on conçoit un produit, avant de le lancer à la fabrication et à la vente, il y a certaines vérifications qui sont effectuées et ces vérifications-là doivent être effectuées même si on est dans un contexte urgent. En matière de marque de commerce, ce sera de valider si un tiers, une entreprise, emploie déjà une marque similaire sur le marché pour des produits similaires. Par exemple, si vous commencez à fabriquer ou vendre des masques, bien évidemment, vous ne pourrez pas les vendre sous la marque 3M puisqu'il y a déjà une entreprise bien connue qui vend des masques sous la marque 3M. Donc, je rappelle brièvement qu'est-ce qu'une marque de commerce. La marque de commerce est très importante puisque c'est une combinaison de mots, de dessins, de symboles, ça peut même être des sons, des odeurs, etc., mais qui vise à distinguer et différencier les produits et services d'une entreprise des produits et services d'une autre entreprise sur le marché. Donc, c'est un élément très important parce que ça permet aux consommateurs d'identifier la source du produit et dans le processus de choix d'une marque, il est très important de faire certaines recherches de disponibilité afin de s'assurer que la marque choisie peut être utilisée avant que le produit soit lancé, parce qu'évidemment, un changement de marque peut s'avérer fort coûteux dans certaines circonstances. Donc, malgré la situation actuelle, malgré l'urgence, il est fortement recommandé de tout de même procéder à des recherches de disponibilité au préalable avant de lancer des produits sous une marque en particulier. C'est ce qui met fin à ma partie de la présentation et je cède en fait dès à présent la parole à mon collègue David Turgeon.
I will now discuss about the pitfalls relating to patent and industrial designs. As Amélie indicated, right now there's a sense of urgency. Companies' decisions reflect this sense of urgency in this current situation. Companies want to make their war efforts. Company wants to remain in business. And companies want to keep their employees busy. Of course, different companies have different imperatives. Some companies are already healthcare manufacturers, and what they want to do at this point is to expand their current production to meet the increased needs. For instance, some companies who are manufacturing hospital beds will produce more hospital beds. Some other companies need to diversify their lines of products. So they are already making some healthcare products, but want to make other healthcare products. And some other companies, as correctly pointed out by Amélie and Nathalie-Anne, have no choice but to completely reorient their activities to stay alive. Otherwise, they will be forced to shut their company down. And in all cases, important investments are likely to be required to achieve this purpose, whether it is to increase the production or to reorient it. And in those circumstances, staying alive is really the focus, and profitability is not necessarily the focus right now. And when you look at the grand schemes of priority, patents and design rights certainly do not fall on the top of the priority list. However, entering into a new venture without doing its homework could prove to be a very costly mistake. And this is for two reasons. The first reason is that you may end up giving up valuable intellectual property rights. And the second reason is because you may end up infringing upon patent or design owned by other entities. But before we move forward, let's see what is a patent and what is an industrial design. A patent is an exclusive right to make, use, and sell an invention. So really, a patent is for protecting inventions. Industrial designs are exclusive rights to make, use, and sell the feature of a product that appeal to the eye. In other words, designs are aimed at protecting aesthetics characteristics of a product. In both cases, this is a monopoly right, which means that if you have a patent or design granted, you will be alone to be able to make, use, and sell it. And it's given for a specific jurisdiction. So let's say that you file and obtain a patent in Canada, you will be protected in Canada only. If you file and obtain patent in Canada and in the United States, you will be protected in both jurisdictions. And this monopoly is granted for a limited number of time. So for patent, the term is generally 20 years from the date of the filing of the application, while for a design, the term is 10 years in Canada, and it varies from one country to another. So coming back to the first costly mistake, namely to give up your IP rights. In the context of COVID-19, it can happen in a number of ways. The first way is dedication of invention to the public. In essence, what it is to develop an invention and give it up to the public so that everybody can use it. Some may have seen in the newspaper the hockey manufacturer CCM, who developed a hood for protecting medical personnel. And they decided to give this invention to the public and to put the plans on their website so that everybody can reproduce the hood. In that case, this is a dedication to the public. So CCM will allow everybody to make this invention. And it is, in some circumstances, it's an approach to be taken. And this is one scenario that we often see in university setups where publicly founded researchers decide to give up their invention. And this is a choice that that makes sense in some instances, but what is important is knowing that we're dedicating the invention to the public and that this choice is informed. Another scenario which can lead to giving up your IP rights is collaboration. We see right now a number of initiatives where people join together and exchange know-how and information with the view of expediting the research efforts. In that case, people start sharing their IP, and at some point it can, depending on the circumstances surrounding this exchange of information, it can lead to public disclosure, even by the owner of the intellectual property or by some of the collaborators, which ultimately could lead to giving up your IP rights. The third scenario is acquiescence. Acquiescence is a circumstance where a patent owner or design owner would have a valid right to enforce, but because it's COVID-19 and because enforcing the IP rights may be ill-perceived by the community, well, the owner simply decide not to enforce it. He acquiesced to others using the invention. In those circumstances, the third parties using the intellectual property may raise some defenses against future infringement assertion proceedings. And lastly, this is what I call temporary lack of surveillance. People have better things to do than monitoring their competitors and checking whether their IP portfolio is being infringed, and they just don't look at it, and they just don't look at their competitors. Therefore, they may end up having more and more competitors over a period of time simply because they are not looking at what the market is doing. with respect to giving up your IP rights, time is not necessarily of the essence, meaning that the Patent Act and Design Act provides for what we call a prescription periods, which means that you can wait for a certain time prior to initiating a lawsuit for patent or design infringement. In the case of patent, for instance, the prescription right is 6 years. So you still have 6 years to go back and initiate a proceeding against a third party who would have infringed your rights. In which case, you know, if you wait too much, this is where this third party can raise some defenses. In terms of securing your IP, what is important to know is that in some countries like Canada and United States, we do have a grace period for filing patents. So, and this grace period allows to validly file a patent application and to obtain a valid patent if there's a public disclosure that emanates from either you or from a collaborator, and that you file this application for a patent within 12 months from the first disclosure. So in terms of giving up your IP rights, you know, whether it's for losing IP rights or finding yourself in a situation where a third party would infringe, you have a little bit of time. It does not mean that you have to neglect this, but you know, in terms of priorities, really what I believe is more important right now is the next step, is the other way to find yourself in a bad situation, namely infringing upon patents or design of others. Of course, like we saw with giving up IP rights, there are various scenarios with various possible consequences. The first scenario of infringement is a scenario where you change your line of products, for instance, to enter a new venture, and you are aware that there are patents and design owned by third parties, and you decide to move without permission. That's one way to deal with existing patents, but this is not necessarily the best way to deal with patents. And this can happen two ways. I mean, so the first way, you can decide to move without permission and conducting no analysis whatsoever. You just move forward and don't think about the consequences. In some circumstances, you know, the conduct of the infringing party will be assessed, and at the end of the day, you can find yourself in a situation of willful infringement. And in Canada, it can ultimately lead to punitive damages, and in the United States, it can have even more serious consequences. There's another way to move while being aware of patent, but without requiring permission from the patent owner, and it's to move after a careful assessment. And in essence, and we will see it in slides later, moving after a careful assessment means obtaining opinions from your patent counsel. It can be an infringement opinion, an invalidity opinion, or it can be both. In a second scenario in which you can find yourself in an infringement situation is that you know about patent and design owned by others, and you decide to get the permission before moving. In this case, actually, you would not be in a situation of infringement because you would be entitled by either the patentee or by the government to move forward with your new project, your new product. So if you obtain a license from the patent owner, this is what I call a negotiated license. you basically enter into negotiation with the patent owner and you try to get a license. Most of the time you will end up paying a royalty fee. However, since there's a situation of urgency related to COVID-19 right now, some patent owner may decide to give you a royalty-free license for a given period, which would be limited in time, for instance, the COVID-19 period. In that way, the patent owner would avoid situation in which we could allege that he acquiesced to using the invention. So it would really put some specificities about what the patent owner is giving you the right to do, instead of not following up his or her IP. In some cases, the patent owner will say, listen, I'm not interested in giving licenses on my technology, in which case what can be considered is to get a compulsory license under the new section 19.4 of the Patent Act. And in essence, this section allows the government or an entity name in an application to carry out the invention. However, this entity carrying out the invention will have to compensate financially the patent owner. This situation has been adopted very recently, and there are no case law about the interpretation of this new section. However, there's a risk that by going through the regimen of compulsory license, the third party may end up having to admit the validity and infringement of the patent, which can become a problem later down the line if things don't go as well as they should, and if the third party wanting to practice the invention wants to pursue its business and activities after the expiry of the compulsory license. In a third scenario, which can be problematic in terms of infringement, is knowing about patent and design rights, but falsely believing that you are entitled to practice the invention. So let's take some examples here. In some cases, you may enter a venture, you start producing a new product, and you falsely believe that the patent relating to this new product was dedicated to the public and that you are free to use it. In some cases, it might be the case, but in other cases, it may not be the case, because true, you will be free to use some of the patent portfolio that has been dedicated to the public, but you may not be entitled to practice other portions of the patent portfolio. So even though you are free to use a portion of it, you will nevertheless be in a situation of infringement. The same is true in cases of open innovation and collaboration and acquiescence. And taking acquiescence as a last example for this scenario, where you start using a new product or manufacturing a new product, and you manufacture it for, let's say, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, and you have no news and no feedback from the patent owner. You may very well believe that you are free to use it. You may make even more investment into that line of product, and you may end up at the end of the day receiving a cease and desist letter from the patent owner, like I said earlier in the presentation, because there's a prescription period, which is for a period of 6 years in the case of patents in Canada. So in this scenario, again, it can make your life much more complicated down the line. In a fourth scenario, you are aware of patents and designs, but you don't appreciate the scope properly. In other words, you know that there's a patent out there, and many people think they know how to properly read a patent. Often it is not the case. And then when you read the patent, you say, okay, I'm outside of the scope of this patent, so we are good to go, while it may not be the case. And again, you end up receiving a cease and desist letter down the line. And the last scenario is simply the lack of knowledge of patent and design rights. You know that patents exist, but you don't know that this third party company has designs or patent over the technology you want to commercialize. And the end result is the same. You end up receiving a cease and desist letter to ask you to stop manufacturing the product. So what are the risks with all of these scenarios? Well, the risk is that you will have made significant investment and that you may end up having to stop your production and you may not be able to recoup your investment. It is true that it may take years to get a permanent injunction, but interlocutory injunctions are still available, and they are granted in very rare cases, but they can be granted in some cases. And since you will not be able to recoup your investment, this may be fatal to your organization that has been weakened already by the economic situation. And why is that? Well, you know, the more successful you will be, the more damages you will end up to have to pay to the patent owner if you are found liable for patent infringement. Also, we saw the scenario of willful infringement earlier in this presentation. Again, depending on your conduct and how you govern yourself, you may end up having to pay punitive damages. And the last thing is that patent litigation is very, very expensive. The legal fees, the expert fees are very high, and just these fees can be sufficient to seriously jeopardize the activities of your company. What to do then? Well, the first thing is to make informed decision. The first thing in making an informed decision is to make a patent and design landscape search on your new product or your new technology. Many tools are available for free. Google Patent is one of them, for instance, or even better, you can ask a patent agent. And basically what will happen is that either yourself or the patent agent will search the patent and design records and search for patents and design that may describe the product that you're intending to make. You will find a number of patents, either a high number of patents or a low number of patents, and many scenarios in between. So if you find in a situation where there are many, many patents, it is a red flag. It is a red flag because the likelihood of you being in a possible situation of infringement is, of course, higher than if you found nothing. Now, the next step, after having found these patents or designs, you have to assess whether you are indeed likely infringing upon those patents. And the first step in this is you will have to see, okay, where I will be making my product, where I will be selling it, and really determine in which jurisdiction your activities will take place. Because as we saw earlier in the presentation, a patent is limited to a given territory. You know, if the patent landscape identifies patent in Europe, it may not be a problem for you here in Canada or even in the United States. However, if you do find patents that are issued in Canada and the United States, then you have to move to the next step. And it is to really get the opinion to see if your product falls within the scope of the claims of the patent. Now, what about, what if the activities are likely infringing? Well, this is where you have to start thinking about what you will do. The first thing that you can consider doing is getting a negotiated license. So you call the patent owner and say, hey, I'm interested in doing this type of product. Are you open to give me a license? And if the answer is no, then you have to consider, a compulsory license for the period of COVID-19. But you may find yourself in a situation where either getting a negotiated license or a compulsory license is a little bit too complicated. In which case, what you can do is to assess the validity of the patent or design. Because although patent and designs are presumed valid, it does not mean that they would stand before a court. There are many cases where patents and designs are being invalidated before the court, and therefore one thing that can be done is to assess the possibilities of this patent being invalidated by a court. And this can be done by finding prior patents and other documents that could, for instance, disclose the invention that is covered by the patent. And in that case, you could have you could move forward with some level of comfort that if you receive a cease and desist letter, at least you will have a defense position to assert against the patent owner. One option that is certainly not a recommendation is to enter the market and doing nothing but hoping for the best. In which case there are significant risk, of course, to be sued and to have little defense for against punitive damages, for instance. It does not mean that punitive damages will be granted, but certainly, depending on your conduct, punitive damages may be asserted against you. And another option, finally, is if you believe you are infringing, if the patent seems to be strong following the validity opinion, one option may simply to change plans and do something else without incurring the risk of entering this new venture. Now, of course, what we see on this slide will vary depending on your business imperatives, what the product you want to put on the market, for how long, and really the strategy has to be dovetailed to what you intend to do. And therefore, if you consider entering a new line of products into a new venture in which you will have a new line of products, or you're pivoting your manufacturing activities, we of course recommend that you speak with us and we will walk you through what you have to do in terms of making sure that you are not infringing upon the patent or design rights of others. I will this complete the portion of my presentation. I will now turn it over to Tony Di Domenico, who will talk about the competition issues.
Thanks very much, David, and hello everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you today and to talk to you a little bit about leveraging and staying on side antitrust competition laws and enforcement. So essential services has become a very topical area in the space of competition and marketing laws. And we've seen a lot of adaptations being made, as well as a lot of direction being provided in the context of essential services. So I think it's a very good time, if you're considering pivoting your business model, to give some thought to competition laws, both with respect to complying with them, which is what we would expect, but also trying to leverage them as well in a situation that's a bit different from what we're used to. So next slide, please. So for the Nature of my presentation, I intend to cover the following 7 topics in sequential order, beginning with where we are with respect to global and domestic enforcement of competition and marketing laws and how that applies to this context of essential services. I want to talk a little bit about what we mean by urgent marketplace issues that have been identified by the Competition Bureau and how that dovetails with essential products and services. And I do want to spend some time on some substantive areas that we think are most impacted in the context of essential services, namely competitor collaborations, deceptive marketing practices in the form of false and misleading claims, and to a lesser extent, but importantly, refusal to deal and unilateral price gouging. And then in honor of our moderator, I do want to talk a little bit about the intersection of IP and competition, and in particular dovetailing from David's presentation, just to give you a sense of how competition and IP work together and how this is actually a fairly good time to pivot your business model within that context. So next slide, please. So there have been some significant COVID-19 statements released by global antitrust and competition agencies around the world because of the uniqueness of this issue and the pressures being put upon competition and marketing laws. And that ranges from the U.S. Department of Justice and Federal Trade Commission to the European Commission to Australia and the UK, and also ranging from groups like the International Competition Network, which provide insights broadly speaking with respect to competition matters. So there's a lot of material to work with that we can use as guidance with respect to how we sort of implement and think through competition and marketing issues in the context of essential services. So next slide, please. So the Commissioner of Competition, Matthew Boswell, has been quite vocal with respect to COVID-19 and has released some statements that focus on urgent marketplace issues. And as you can see here from this quote, he identifies prioritizing urgent marketplace issues in order to protect Canadians moving forward. So if we move on to the next slide, you'll see that he doesn't provide any sort of specificity about what those urgent marketplace issues are. And the reason for that is I think he wants to maintain flexibility moving forward. But given sort of further commentary released from the Competition Bureau and developments around the world, we can identify as an urgent marketplace issue the supply of essential products and services. And what are those products and services? Well, it's a lot of what we talked about earlier today. You heard Stuart touch upon it, and we heard David touch upon it. It's the things like medical devices, personal protective equipment, ventilators, respirators, medications that sort of hone in on preventing or treating COVID-19, disinfectant agents, personal hygiene products, and even things like air purifiers and filters, which have become very popular now having regard to COVID-19. This is an evolving list, but one that is important because we as we're going to talk about in a moment, we've seen some developments globally and domestically on the competition front dealing with these very products. So next slide, please. So beginning with competitor collaborations, you see here the statement from the Commissioner of Competition about that. You know, competitor collaborations are something that are very sensitive in the competition front. Obviously, what's prohibited is price fixing, rigging bids, agreements to, say, restrict the output of products, agreements that involve the market allocation, things of that sort. But at the same time, there's been a sort of global effort to allow for forms of collaboration by companies who can actually provide or supply critical products in the COVID-19 circumstance. So this has put a lot of pressure on competition agencies to deal with this and to try to balance a rapid and thoughtful COVID-19 response to benefit Canadians, while at the same time ensuring that our conspiracy laws, which is sort of at the core of what competition enforcers do, are not being contravened. So if you move on to the next slide, you know, just as a by way of background, in Canada, we look at competitor collaborations as sort of 2 buckets. The first being the criminal prohibition, which is reserved for those naked restraints on competition. where it's assumed that there are no pro-competitive benefits, namely, fixing the price of goods or services, or agreeing between competitors where to allocate your markets so as to increase the ability of those suppliers to increase prices on the product. But then there are those civil reviewable practice agreements, what we call our 90.1. These are competitor collaborations that actually can have pro-competitive benefits, like joint ventures, research and development agreements, strategic alliances, things of that sort, that are not seen as cartels at all, but can at times also impact competition through an effects-based analysis. And that's what we look at to see is, okay, we'll accept that the agreement is legal, but does it have an adverse effect on competition? So that's how we think about these things. So moving on to the next slide. Going back to the criminal, we look at A, B, and C. These are really the criminal aspects that are problematic from a competition perspective. And the sensitive areas in particular are, prices, production capacity or output, allocating customers or market territories. These kinds of agreements are what really get on the radar of competition agencies. And as you can see here, the penalties for them can be quite significant. Moving on to the next slide. Now, all that being said, you see here some interesting social media posts being released by the Competition Bureau as an example. Here, the Bureau is forwarding a Health Canada LinkedIn post that asks the question, are you a health product manufacturer or distributor looking to get involved in efforts to support Canada's response to COVID-19? It's a very interesting post that's being forwarded, because one of the things that can facilitate a product manufacture or distribution of such products is in fact competitor collaborations. And so how do you reconcile that sort of initiative with the competition laws that we have in place? So moving on to the next slide. And what you see here is that Canada hasn't implemented a suspension of its conspiracy laws, but what it has done through its statements is it's provided what I would call a more relaxed but cautious approach to sort of COVID-19 competitor collaborations. The Competition Bureau has noted that it's actually created a team of officers that are prepared to assess proposed collaborations and to respond and provide sort of rapid decisions with respect to proposals that are put before the Bureau with respect to competitor collaborations. And this is something that most agencies around the world have done. If you move on to the next slide, I can show you just a couple of examples. The U.S. Department of Justice has looked at a couple of these medical supplier collaborations in light of COVID-19. And on two very examples, one on April 4th and another one on April 20th, they've actually allowed for, or quote unquote blessed, medical supply distributors to get together to collaborate with respect to providing critical COVID-19 devices or personal protective equipment and medication. And you can see this also evolving into medical devices as well. So the US has actually done this and allowed for things that otherwise would not be permitted if we weren't in the COVID-19 world. And so this is an important example for our viewers to think through, that this is actually, we're not trying to, of course, encourage price fixing or bid rigging or anything of that sort, but if you think that a collaboration would be beneficial to facilitate a legitimate COVID-19 response, there are actually mechanisms in place now to allow for that to happen. The next slide, please. So if you're thinking about this, I think you need to be prepared to address certain issues. The firms involved and the parameters of the collaboration, what's the proposed scope and duration, how this collaboration will achieve a COVID-19 related objective, why the coordination is necessary. And you're going to have to be prepared to talk about the rationale and the intended effects of the coordination. Is the coordination addressing shortages or ensuring supply of a product that otherwise wouldn't be available but for the collaboration? Is the coordination intended to reduce costs? And that's why it's being proposed. Is a coordination going to increase prices, which is, could be a concern of competition agencies? And will the coordination decrease the production or supply? And which would be another concern of agencies. So just foreshadowing, these are the kind of things that if you're considering that, you really want to consider. So moving on to the next slide and jumping onto a new topic, false and misleading claims is also within the jurisdiction of the Competition Act and the predominant regime, although there are others, for false and misleading claims is the Competition Bureau, generally speaking. And the Commissioner of Competition has made a statement, that's a quote from him, where he's prioritizing enforcement with respect to false and misleading claims about a product's ability to prevent or cure the COVID-19 virus. So you can see that there's a significant amount of concern about claims out there that about performance of products and services when they may not actually can't be proven. So moving on to the next slide. These are some of the LinkedIn posts that we've seen that the Competition Bureau released with respect to this issue. And it ranges from products that propose to treat or cure COVID-19, products like air filters and purifiers, filtering out the coronavirus from your home, bee-related products being used to somehow aid in COVID-19, and there are numerous other examples like this. So this is certainly within the radar of the Competition Bureau and really trying to stay on top of this. So moving on to the next slide. And just to give you a sense of what the law is that they're talking about, is that it's a notion of performance claims. So claims about or advertisements regarding the performance, length of life, efficacy of a product or service are we characterize as performance claims. Claims about what a product can do or can't do, or what a service can or cannot do. And under the laws, under the Competition Act, any type of performance claim must be based on the notion of adequate and proper testing, which is a very fluid, non-specific phrase that basically means, have you done testing to substantiate what you claim this product can do? Obviously, in the medical device world and in the health and supplements, medication, food, things like that, there are significant regulatory regimes by underpinning what a product can or cannot do. The Bureau's is a bit more general, and it gets at, if you say an air purifier can purify or deal with COVID-19 symptoms, what testing have you done to substantiate that or not? And it's a flexible test, but at the same time, it's important that you be able to substantiate that. And the onus is on the party making the representation to substantiate it. The important that to the extent that you're a business that wants to make a representation about what your product or service can do, particularly in the context of essential services, you want to make sure that before you make that representation, that you have some form of testing that was done to essentially substantiate that representation being made. And again, because if the Competition Bureau does come and ask questions, you don't want to be in a position where you don't have that testing done, or you're looking to make that testing after the representation is made. Because right then and there, you'll be in some trouble vis-a-vis the Competition Bureau on that front. So next slide, please. Just to finish the point on false and misleading claims, false and misleading health-related claims was a Bureau priority before COVID-19. This was the annual plan of the Bureau that there's a hyperlink to, and it does identify health and science products and advertising health products and services as a priority. So you can only imagine now we're in a COVID-19 world how more important that's become. But just keep in mind that this has always been a priority for the Bureau, and I think will even become more of a priority in the Bureau moving forward. Next slide, please. So refusal to deal is essentially this concept of refusing to supply a product or service to a customer. Now, in Canada, suppliers generally have wide contractual freedom to supply their products and services to really whomever they wish to, even with suppliers who have considerable market power. And that's not changed in any way. So I'm not trying to suggest that landscape has changed. However, refusals to supply critical products or services in response to COVID-19, if I may suggest, maybe now under some greater scrutiny. So to the extent that you do pivot your business model to some form of essential product, you really want to make sure that to the extent you are refusing supply of that product to a particular person or entity for whatever reason, that you memorialize the sort of valid business justifications for that and think through what that would be. Because the concern is that if there are these products and services that are really necessary to service Canadians and protect Canadians in some way arising from COVID-19, that decisions aren't being seen to be made to refuse supply to particular suppliers for advantageous business reasons. Again, recognizing that you lawfully are allowed to exclude supply, subject to circumstances where entities may have market power, and that may increase the price of services upon a customer. But I think there is a sensitivity to that right now. And so I'm not saying don't do it, but I'm saying if you are going to do it, make sure you sort of think through why you're not doing it and memorialize your reasons for that. So to the extent there is some scrutiny, you're able to defend that decision in a fair and valid way. Next slide, please. So price gouging has become a very important issue in Canada, and as I'm sure you've all read reports of concerns about this from local to provincial politicians. And it's important to point out that the Competition Act doesn't regulate prices. It is not a regulator. It's a law enforcement agency with respect to competition. And the Bureau doesn't prevent price increases. The Bureau is interested in ensuring that there is vigorous and effective competition. And the view being that if you have vigorous and effective competition, that will drive prices down and innovation up. So it's not going to be there to ensure, to tell someone to lower their price. However, one thing we have to keep in mind is that there is an extreme sensitivity right now to sort of price gouging, selling products or services for a price that is, significantly higher than we otherwise would be selling for in a pre-COVID-19 world. So you can see that there may be opportunities for the Bureau to engage indirectly on this issue, and that might be through advocacy efforts to sort of ensure that this not happen through sort of public shaming or at least writing about it or encouraging people not to do it. But it's also could be an indicia of market power that could be used in a broader context. So if there's an allegation that someone is abusing their dominant market position, one of the indirect acts or acts that could be seen as anti-competitive would be, increasing the prices at super competitive levels. Again, that's indirect, but it's something that will be on the Bureau's radar. But if you look at what certain provinces have done, Ontario and British Columbia as an example, they've actually implemented measures to prevent price gouging. Ontario, as an example, my home province, has implemented an emergency prohibition order prohibiting price gouging for necessary goods. And what the prohibition is essentially prohibiting necessary goods from being sold at unconscionable prices. Now, if you move on to the next slide. So moving on to the definition of necessary goods, as you can see, the definition of necessary goods includes many of the products and services that we've been talking about today, such as masks and gloves and non-prescriptive medications and things that would arise in a COVID-19 circumstance. And the definition of unconscionable price in the emergency order really is broad and includes products that grossly exceed at which similar goods are readily available. So it does give the province of Ontario wide latitude to scrutinize this. So again, what we want to ensure is that you price your product at a competitive level, and competition, in fact, encourages you to use your business models and to price things at prices at which you think customers would pay for it. So that's not at all being discouraged. It's just you want to be mindful of these very sensitive areas and measures that are being put in place to prevent at least a couple of things. One being subject to any sort of public scrutiny in the form of legal proceedings being brought or inquiries brought by the provinces. But I would say more importantly, you want to try to avoid what we've seen as public shaming by politicians in their daily press conferences. And at least in my province, we've seen the Premier target particular service providers who have, scrutinized price gouging, or at least products that should be or priced higher than at least the Premier would have thought. So you really want to try to avoid that moving forward. So moving on to the next slide. I want to close just with respect to talking a little bit about the intersection of IP and competition laws, just to dovetail what David Turgeon was talking about. And just to say that, you know, competition law and IP in one way can be seen as in conflict with each other, because IP is trying to restrict use and competition is trying to encourage competition. But the more modern view of that is that IP and competition laws are really harmonious, since IP laws and competition laws are really there to promote efficiency enhancing investments. So in terms of understanding how competition law works with IP, competition laws are not there to interfere with the mere exercise of IP rights. So it's not there to interfere or deem anti-competitive an owner's use of its own IP, or the exercise of that owner's right to unilaterally exclude others from using IP. Competition laws really only get involved where, in the Bureau's view, an entity is exceeding or using more than their IP rights to do certain things. But in addition to that, where that results in the creation, enhancement, or maintenance of market power for an extended period of time, which is a pretty high threshold to meet, like extending the scope of rights or extending the terms of rights in a way that could have anti-competitive effects. So I guess the message from there is that please don't be afraid to use your IP rights. That shouldn't be something from a competition perspective that should stop you, particularly in a COVID-19 world. So just moving on to the next slide. Thank you very much for listening to our presentation. And just as a point, we do have a competition law blog, Competition Chronicle, that does provide continual updates on these matters and much more. So I do urge you to check that out to the extent you're looking for further information about what I've discussed or any other competition or marketing law development. And back to you, David.
So thank you, Tony. We will now move to questions and answers. We will try to address as many of your submitted questions as possible. But of course, if you have further inquiries, please do not hesitate to reach out directly to our presenters. The first question is for Nathalie-Anne. Nathalie-Anne, it would be great if you could discuss whether all employees of a company designated essential services would be considered essential workers, i.e. accounting, legal, human resources employees of such company versus those installing services, etc.
Alors, bon, merci d'avoir posé cette question. C'est une excellente question. Alors, la réponse, c'est lorsqu'une entreprise exerce des activités qui font partie d'un secteur qui est considéré prioritaire, tous les employés de l'entreprise demeurent prioritaires. Donc, on ne regarde pas si, par exemple, un employé fait de la comptabilité. Est-ce que la comptabilité est prioritaire? Ce qu'il faut regarder, c'est les activités de l'entreprise en tant que telle. Donc, par exemple, comme dans une pharmacie, tous les employés qui travaillent pour la pharmacie sont considérés comme œuvrant dans un secteur prioritaire et les activités du milieu de travail sont maintenues.
Merci. Une autre question pour toi, Nathalie-Anne. Je suis dans le secteur de la production audiovisuelle. Pour le moment, seules les émissions d'actualité et d'information semblent être considérées comme essentielles. Comment en élargir la portée?
Comment en élargir la portée? Alors, la portée va en être élargie, bien sûr, de la volonté du gouvernement. Alors, la façon d'élargir la portée des exceptions qui sont prévues au décret, c'est évidemment de faire des représentations à cet effet auprès du ministère de la Santé ou du ministre du Travail.
Merci. Une question à laquelle je vais répondre. Avec la crise du COVID-19 qui prévaut, un entrepreneur souhaite se tourner vers la production de produits alimentaires en serre à grand volume. Que devrait-il savoir en termes de réglementation, MAPAC, Santé Canada, etc., avant de se lancer? Bien, en fait, pour répondre à cette question-là, il faut savoir que la réponse va varier selon le type de produit qui va faire l'objet de la production en serre et aussi des activités commerciales qui vont s'en suivre. Est-ce qu'on parle de production seulement et ensuite de vente à un grossiste? Est-ce qu'on parle ici de vente aussi directement à des consommateurs? Alors, considérant ces enjeux-là, Pour répondre à cette question-là, il faut vraiment regarder encore une fois le produit et les activités. Et j'invite la personne qui a posé cette question-là de communiquer avec moi et puis je pourrais la référer à nos spécialistes en réglementation agroalimentaire pour essayer de bien l'aiguiller dans ses démarches futures. Nathalie-Anne, est-ce que la liste des services essentiels est immuable ou bien est-elle en constant changement?
En fait, la liste n'est absolument pas immuable et elle est appelée à changer de façon considérable au cours des semaines qui vont venir, considérant la volonté du gouvernement de réouvrir les milieux de travail et de permettre la reprise des activités. Ça fait quelques semaines déjà que la population et que les entreprises sont en confinement. Il importe pour le gouvernement, on l'a entendu lors des dernières conférences de presse, de se mettre à faire retourner, que la machine recommence en fait à tourner. Et donc, la liste n'a jamais été immuable, mais elle va être en constante modification de façon accélérée au cours des prochaines semaines. Alors, il est important de se maintenir à l'affût. Vous pouvez communiquer avec vos avocats chez Fasken pour savoir là, si vous avez dû cesser vos activités, si vous pouvez les reprendre. Ça va nous faire plaisir de vous conseiller à cet effet.
This completes the questions and answers that were submitted to us. Of course, if you have other questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to one of us and we will be pleased to answer to them. Also, please make sure to consult Fasken's resources for continual updates on these matters and more specifically the Fasken's Coronavirus Knowledge Center. Also, please subscribe to our Fasken's The Angle IP blog for continuous update on these matters and more. Thank you very much for attending. Please keep well and safe. Thank you.